evening. And yes, thank you for the introduction. I started my own journey as a mum many years ago. My kids are in their teens now, listening to a lot of talks, a lot of scaremongering, and coming out of them with hyperventilating feeling of complete anxiety and thinking, what the heck am I going to be doing when my kids start going online? Because it just seems to be a lot of doom and gloom and very little practical solutions. So that's really why we started Be-in-Touch, was about parents. It is about that kind of support group for parents, trying to find the what should I do, the what next, the practical steps, because of course tech is a part of our modern lives and it's a part of education. But we also all know, as parents or as aunties, as uncles, as grandmas, whatever it is, when we're looking at this new generation of children, that we also know that it's not healthy for them to spend the amount of time that they do online, and they really are losing out. So tonight we're going to talk about, it's a message of hope. The book that Sean was referring to is going to be part of the work that I'm going to be chatting about, not my book, wish it was, but not my book. And we are going to talk a little bit into that, but it's all part of what we're really saying at the moment. We're at a tipping point. We're at a beautiful time, actually. As I said, hope, a huge amount of shift that's happening. And it's been happening for a number of years, but it's really been, it's like this big snowball that's just been pushed up the hill by a whole lot of really great, intelligent people that have been sending the alarm bells out the last few years about what too much and inappropriate screen time is doing to our kids. And a wonderful man, social psychologist called Dr. Jonathan Haidt, has recently published a book, and I think that's what Sean is referring to. And that is really put all of this research of the last 14 years into something that is very digestible, usable, and more importantly, it has suggestions and a roadmap for the way forward, should we care to listen. And so these are the type of talks that I'm doing with communities like yours that are centered around doing what is best for our children, for our village of children, and looking at ways in which we can come together and make changes that maybe need to happen, reflect on decisions that have been made, reflect on decisions still to be made, and support each other while we are doing so. And so the theme of the talk is really about that what we knew then is suddenly what we don't know now. So this is very much, I want us to be a safe space, a non-judgmental space. We're all making the best decisions we can for our families with the best knowledge that we can. But just contextualizing our conversation tonight, and I love it we can pick out some of the gems that you guys are asking at the end or during the talk. But it's this whole shift in thinking suddenly that too much and inappropriate screen time has been and is being conclusively linked to the decreasing mental and physical health of our children. And it's not dissimilar to other tipping points that we've had that in our lifetimes, when it became very clear that unless we doused our kids in sun cream, that the sun was very damaging and caused skin cancer, that our kids had to be in proper booster seats because the faster our cars went, the bigger the impact. And of course, when it came to smoking, that this fantastic, sexy lifestyle that the big tobacco companies were all selling us was actually a lie. So it's that kind of tipping point where suddenly we're being presented with some well-packaged research and information on the basis of which we can now choose how we want to respond individually and also as a collective. And so I'd like to introduce to you this wonderful Dr. Jonathan Haidt, and he's looked at the data from the last 14 years. So pretty much since the iPhone came on board about 2007, but once apps and games that could be downloaded on these smart devices really started coming into the fore, with all their notifications and their persuasive technology pulling all of our kids in. And he said, interestingly enough, that the research is showing in the last 14 years, we've made two big mistakes. Overprotecting our kids in the real world, which of course is where they need, and you as Montessori community know this very well, that they need to learn from huge amounts of independent real world experience, because that's where they're learning all these life skills. And through no mistake of our own, because we just didn't know better. We've underprotected them online, where many of them, as it turns out, were being very harmed, especially during these very vulnerable years. So this is what Jonathan's book is about. It's called The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. It's a fantastic read. It's not easily available yet other than online. It's got quite a long wait, but it's really worth it. If you're looking for something after this talk to get into, really worth ordering that book. And I've got to quickly now move on to, unfortunately, we've got sound in our videos, so I've just got to quickly do a share screen for you, which I hope is going to be fairly seamless. And Shan, will you just keep me alert if the sound doesn't come through, because I'd really like, if we can, that these videos that we are going to show will come through. So what I'd like to just, in Jonathan's own words, is for him to tell you what his premise is about.
You described that there was a perfect.
I'm going to go back. So
you described that there was a perfect storm of events that landed us here. And you say that people may be surprised to know that this started in the 80s. You say that parents were overprotective in some ways and underprotective when it came to the viral world. Explain that.
Sure. So human childhood has always been about play. That's true for all mammals. Anyone who's had a puppy or a kitten at home, they want to play all the time. They have to play because that's how mammals wire up their brains. It's part of our program. And from, 300 million BC or whenever mammals start until the 1980s or 1990s, that's what kids did. And, we grew up in a time when there was a crime wave, there was dangers out there, but everyone went out and played by the time you were 7 or 8. But in the 80s and 90s...
Who played out there when you were 7 or 8? Yeah, we all
That was just
did.
the norm. Everybody did.
Yeah.
And it's a lot safer now, but we're so scared now. We're so scared that if we ever let our child out...
And that period was when, like in the 90s, I remember when kids were on milk cartons.
Exactly. That was the 80s, yes.
Yes.
And then it goes into, that's right, into the 90s.
Into the 90s, where parents were afraid to let their kids do anything. Mm-hmm. You couldn't let your kids stay in the front yard. You couldn't let your kids play with other... Yeah. So I'm calling this the backstory here. It's the loss of the play-based childhood. And if you take away play from children, you're going to have problems. They need a lot of independent, unsupervised play so that they can learn how to be self-supervising. That's our goal, is to work ourselves out of a job as parents, that they can be self-supervising. So let's make this point again to parents, because play isn't just play. Play is learning how to be socialized with other people. It's learning how to...
It's nature's social emotional learning. It is the most effective way to learn how to cooperate, how to manage your emotions, how to make plans, how to adjudicate rules. It's everything.
How to hear no and react to no.
That's right. And you want the game to keep going, so you stay in.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. And so that happened with parents overprotecting.
That's right.
And then along comes the smartphones.
That's right.
Where parents were underprotecting.
That's right. So as kids are kind of retreating from the real world and they're spending a lot more time online, the millennials were spending a lot more time on AOL or Messenger, whatever it was in the 90s and the early 2000s, but their mental health didn't get worse. The first wave of the internet didn't mess us up. It was incredibly exciting. And actually, I want all the parents here to remember how you felt when you first encountered the internet, if you remember the 90s. I mean, it was magical. It was like a godlike power. And so as our kids began spending more and more time there, we thought, well, maybe this will be good for them. Like, technology, like this is the way of the future. So we let our kids change childhood. We were complicit in it, but we didn't know any better. We thought this was going to be good. And then everything changes. You get the smartphone in 2007, but it's not so bad at first. It's only then you get the App Store, then you get push notifications, then you get 100 apps on your phone. And every time your child downloads an app, they're giving permission to a company to interrupt them, and they're giving permission to strange people all over the world to contact your child in many of the apps. And so this is when things get really dark. 2010 to 2015, everything changes.
So what Jonathan has had a look at from the data is he said essentially what has been happening in the last 14 years is that we have gone from a play-based childhood to a device-based childhood. And the teen years no longer look like what they used to in terms of teens having lots of social, emotional interactions, building lots of skills that they need to become fully functional adults, because they're all sitting together. But of course, they're all sitting on those phones. And I just wanted to take a minute to go back with a little bit of empathy and some understanding for why our children are in this position, again, through no fault of their own. And just to think about that beautiful brain that's developing at this stage, and that prefrontal cortex, that frontal lobe of our brain, which is responsible for all of our executive decisions, all that planning, impulse control, risk versus consequence weighing up, focus, emotional control. So all of those are exactly the parts of the brain developing only right up until 25 that big tech has put millions and billions of dollars into understanding how to hack. So pretty much once the iPhone comes in 2007, and there's a race with tech developers with each new app and each new game to get that user in as young as possible and to keep them there, it's all about hacking the developing prefrontal cortex. And at the same time, of course, especially once we're getting into the neurotransmitter dopamine. So the one hand, our brakes are not working very well, but we've got a foot on the gas pedal. And so the growth of the dopamine receptors at this time, which need so much more dopamine to get that brain, to get that body going, and a teenager who is looking typically and always has done for risks and thrills and the rush and the rewards that come with that, is now got a challenge in terms of how it's finding that. Because typically when that boredom itch happens and our teens would need to do something about it, back in the day, hundreds, thousands years ago, the developing pubescent adult would go, youngster would go out and take risks, take all these small micro risks, social, emotional risks, maybe physical risks, learning how to go and hunt, to go and scavenge, to go to war against another tribe, to take over another cave. Whatever they were, those little risks all added up because the reward and the rush that they got that fed the dopamine in the brain also meant that they were learning skills. And those were survival skills. Those were skills that would mean they could leave their tribe and they could go and become fully functional adults and develop their own tribe. What we've got now in the modern scenario now is we've got this quick reward system that is developed. So as soon as our teen feels the slightest bit bored, needs to scratch that itch, it's just all too easy to reach into the pocket and grab the phone, because on that phone is a world of dopamine hits, all those likes, all those social media alerts, all the push me pulley of Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram. It's all sitting right there. It's just so easy for them. So easy for them to get that quick and easy boredom scratch. Is somebody needing to? Oh, it's just somebody got there. Sorry, Diane, I think your microphone is on. And so what's happening with this generation is that instead of learning all those small little risks on the way, which would have given them the dopamine reward, but more importantly, would have given them those skills, they are the subject of a whole lot of missed opportunities. And I deal a lot with parents who kids have tried to fly the nest, they have gone to university, they are flunking out, they can't maintain relationships, they're coming home and everyone's trying to work out what is the problem, lying on the couch depressed. Then, they've confessed that they've got gaming addiction, particularly amongst the 20-somethings. TikTok is a very addicting platform for them, particularly. Some of them perhaps addicted to online pornography. So it's a real issue in terms of actually getting our teens into the stage where they actually can become really fully functional human beings. In addition to this, what they are sitting with and what's populating their information, what's infusing their brain with these kind of apps which have been developed, is a whole new world of information, which doesn't resonate necessarily with the family values and beliefs. And this is not something that they're able to talk about with their parents, because it's not something that is easily sat down and talked about. It's sort of like a slow drip feed that they get. It becomes their reality. It becomes their world. They are just dealing with it internally. What we see are the after manifestations, perhaps of what we think is a moody teenager, maybe typical hormonal kind of responses. But they are dealing with so much which is flooding into their brain from a content perspective, and not all of it age appropriate. So in the research that Jonathan's been crunching, what he's seen is in the last 14 years, this huge increase in anxiety, depression, addiction, self-harm, suicide of the teenage generation, together with a decrease in academic performance, sleep, family time, friends time, and exercise. Because of course, if you spend too much time on your screen, you're not going to be able to get to everything that you need to do in your life. And he has had a look at the different harms. Girls and boys are presenting slightly differently because of how the genders, the brains are neurologically wired slightly differently. So for our girls, we are wired for a lot of external self-validation, whereas our boys look much more inwardly. What he's seeing in the information that he's presenting here is based on US information, but he's looked at 33 European countries as well as Australia and New Zealand, all very, very similar, correlates and tracks on a very similar basis. But he says the girls are showing higher rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm, whereas the boys are showing high rates of online pornography and gaming addiction, and then suicide. And he says he can track this from when the play-based childhood officially ends, and that is when our teens' lives start moving onto smartphones filled with social media, apps, and games. So there's 5 common foundational harms he chats about or talks about in the book, which is common to both boys and girls. First is the opportunity cost. If you are looking at average teen in the US, upwards to 7 to 9 hours a day on non-school related screens, right? So the opportunity cost we're talking about there is that to spend so much time on a screen, you've got to take it away from somewhere else. So you're going to take it away from time with your family and friends. So you've got social deprivation. You're going to take it away from sleep. And so we have a generation of jet lag teens, which are not getting enough sleep, one of the key foundations for good mental health. You've got attention fragmentation. A lot of the social media apps are built on these very quick 30-second, microbytes of information. A lot of that you might be already seeing in your classrooms. And then you've got the behavioral addictions. So girls are much more addicted to many of the social media apps, and boys, as I've said, have particular addictions that we're going to talk about just now. So he looks particularly at the girls, and he says that the girls are particularly prone to visual social comparison, which is what apps like Instagram so perfectly serve up for them, because nobody posts a bad day on Instagram. So what they're seeing is not the reality, but they are trying to achieve it. They are trying to strive towards perfectionism, a level of perfectionism which is never going to be attainable. A lot of relational aggression. So that is just, the fancy name for mean girl behavior, that if one girl can knock another girl off that social ladder, she can climb up, take her place. Emotional contagion, where within a group of girls, one particular girl might get completely hyped up, very emotional about something, and suddenly you've got the whole group following suit. We've seen sociogenic mental illnesses. So that happened notably on TikTok with a Tourette's eye tick that a lot of the teens developed. And of course, not only limited to our girls, but they are particularly vulnerable to sexual predation and harassment, because it's so hard to know who anybody really is online. And when it's coming to our boys have been retreating from the real world anyway for many years, trying to get to grips with what their masculinity means in a modern world. But now we have got apps and games and online platforms which are tapping into how their brains are so neurologically wired to protect their family or go to war against another tribe to get more resources, which is where gaming fits so perfectly, in particular first shooter gaming platforms, and then to go and find a mate and to procreate and to keep the gene pool going, which is where online pornography is also satisfying that very basic need. And we are seeing boys withdrawing more and more from family and school because a lot of these addictions are not addictions necessarily that are out in the open. They're keeping a lot of this secret and they just can't talk about it. So here in South Africa, we have seen over the last few years very similar kinds of trends that have been happening here. This is not just a European or an American problem. Our children here are going through very, very similar challenges. The work that we do with grade 4 to grade 11s is all put into a database, peer-reviewed by the Youth Research Unit at the Bureau of Market Research. And our kids are saying ever younger that they are going onto phones and tablets. And I'd like to just pause here and just reflect that a tablet is exactly the same as a smartphone. Both of them smart devices that give our kids access to the world and to all the millions, billions of strangers online. So a majority are saying by age 10 already that they have access to their own phone and tablet. High proportions saying that by age 12, they're already on social media. And just bear in mind that although the social media apps themselves might say that the age restriction is 13, this is set from a US data privacy perspective because they are mining the data of the user. It has nothing to do with whether that app is appropriate from an age perspective. At the moment, apps and app stores are not regulated, so they set their own age limits on that. That is something that the US is taking a lead on working on, and we are hoping in the very near future that we're going to be looking at real age ratings and restrictions coming out from the States, particularly on social media. A lot of them telling us that they're allowed to have their phones and their tablets in their rooms at night. Those phones and tablets don't have parental controls or filters. And time and again, they will tell us that it's late at night where cyberbullying and inappropriate stranger contact is happening. So they are telling us that this perfect storm where parents are oblivious to the fact of what's going on these devices late at night, tired brains making bad choices. So if nothing else, whenever I do these talks, it's just the one thing to do for parents after leaving a talk like this is to make that decision that going forward, no devices in rooms at night. No devices in rooms at night. So that's just the golden tip. I mean, if we all did that together, you can just imagine how these stats would decrease. They've got a lot of self-awareness, these kids of ours. They understand and they're aware that they are using their phones too much and the phones hamper their normal life. They've got typical blind spots like we always do, of course. When they look up from their phones and they want to engage with their friends are on their phones. So, you know, to a man and a woman, all of us think that it's our friends that are actually using the phones too much, far more than us. The bullying statistics are, you know, on the increase. The amount of stranger contact that's happening, much of it via social media, is very alarming. And this is inappropriate stranger contact. So when we ask the kids if you've been sent an inappropriate message or a picture, that is what this is referring to. Exposure to online pornography, 60% say that they've seen it by age 10, and it's first seen at home, because most of us, especially with young kids, feel that unless they've got their own device, everything should be good, but we forget about the home computer. We forget about the laptop or perhaps the family's tablet, where it is just very easy for them to go down all sorts of rabbit holes. Self-harm, another issue on the rise amongst this generation, becoming very normalized, both those that are considering it and those that have actually seen others do it online. And the other big challenge amongst our teenagers, of course, is also sexting, with that too becoming, sending of nudes becoming a very normalized part of that generation. So what Jonathan really is talking about in the book is this whole idea that we as parents are in this very difficult position between a rock and a hard place. When it's coming time for us to make these decisions about our kids going on tech, is that we don't feel like it's something that is an easy decision to make, because if we're the only one who makes the decision about delaying how and when and what the circumstances are around our kids going online, then they are the only ones that are being left out. Because if all the other kids have access to smartphones and to social media, then it's just our kid that is going to suffer. So Jonathan talks about this idea of a collective parent trap. It's a bit similar to a group of fishermen where the fishing stocks are being depleted. One fisherman decides to reduce his catch, but nobody else does. So the only person who actually suffers is that one fisherman, and everyone else still carries on or even benefits further. So it's this idea that we all have to move as a collective, and that the tipping point is round about a 25% of that particular group before some change can start happening. And Jonathan has identified the changes that he thinks we need to urgently be thinking about if we want to improve the mental health of this next generation of kids. He says we need a collective swing towards these 4 norms. And it's no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, so at least giving kids the chance to have academic days, which are phone-free and free of distraction. And then, as he spoke about in the previous clip, a lot more play, independence, and responsibility in the real world. And I'm just going to let Jonathan quickly take you through the thinking there.
Why are we all doing it? Only because everyone else is. That's it. That's the reason. This stuff is not made for kids. This stuff is toxic for kids. Really, it should be, minors should not be on it. It should be 18. But there's a consensus building that while 18 might be best for mental health, 16 is a kind of a reasonable compromise. In the UK, they're exploring that. The Florida bill just did that. A number of states are doing that. In my book, I recommend 4 norms by which we can escape from this trap. The first is no smartphone before high school. Just use flip phones or phone watches. The second is no social media till 16. It might sound impossible, but because if your child is the only one, right? If you're the only one who doesn't have it, it's incredibly painful. But what if half the kids in your school didn't have it? Well, then it's not so bad. The third one is phone-free schools. We've just got to get them entirely out of the schools. There's no role for them. And then the fourth is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. If we're going to cut back on screen use a lot, especially in elementary and middle school, we have to give them what we took from them, which is play, which is each other. And so if we have to, now, it used to be you could just send the kids out, come home when the streetlights are on. I understand that's going to be harder today. We have to be more intentional. But if you can find ways to just help your kids hang out together with no screens, they're going to have a great time.
I can see all the teens in this room reacting to that. When you said phone-free schools, you should have seen her face like, are you kidding me? A phone-free school? But I agree that if everybody is doing it, it makes it really, really hard for your child not to be a part of it. So it has to be a community. Everybody has to decide as a community. And I think one of the reasons why people haven't decided, because people actually don't know how bad it is. So you are sounding the alarm and you are sounding the alarm. And this generation really is the generation that we're experimenting with. And they're going to pay the price for it because people don't yet understand how bad it is and how damaging it's going to be to the future.
That's right. I would just say 4 years ago, I think that statement would be perfectly correct. And then we had COVID and everyone was confused. And now that COVID is receding, I'm finding actually most of us kind of knew this, like most of us felt like, wait, this is really wrong. Something is really wrong here.
And that lovely lady that you saw there, Dr. Becky Kennedy, I'm sure that the Montessori community resonate a lot with her parenting expertise, but she is also fully on board with all of these results that Jonathan is talking about so eloquently. So I'm just going to run through actually back to front, a little bit of information around these norms that Jonathan is putting out there and suggesting that we really need to think about very strongly as communities. And starting with number 4 about more independence, play, and responsibility for our kids. And obviously that is offline, a wonderful offshoot the Let Grow organization is something that, go and have a look and explore as a community, as schools. It gives lots of tips for both schools and parents about how to give our kids all these micro skill opportunities to become much more independent, but also able to learn as they're going, and build and layer these on to their CV as you will for becoming fully functional adults. So that's a really wonderful site to go and have a look at. The third one he mentioned is phone-free schools. Now, not so much always a problem in primary schools, definitely becomes a problem in high schools. Last year, UNESCO called for a global ban on smartphones in schools internationally. Their research has shown the huge distractions that smartphones bring into a classroom, as well as it being opportunities for cyberbullying, and that even being close to a phone, so that having it in your pocket versus in a bag next to you or in the classroom somewhere versus being right outside the classroom, has a huge impact on concentration levels during learning. So here in South Africa, we have started a petition to the Minister of Basic Education, and we are very firmly supporting this particular move to get phone-free schools in South Africa. If we can get policy at a national level, regulation at a national level, it would make this job so much easier for many, many, many schools. So there's a petition out there if you guys would love to support it. I know you've probably all got much younger children, but yeah, high school is looming. High school's coming your way. I'm working with a lot of high schools. I've worked with my own son's high school too, and had some wonderful results once we start going through the science behind this and how it just gives an opportunity for teachers to teach and learners to learn in an undistracted environment where real interpersonal connection can happen and can occur. So the second norm that he's talked about is delaying social media until 16. And this is not a magical age. I think it's just something that we're trying to land on as a community of NGOs and online safety activists. Certainly, there are more conservative states in the US that have already started drafting legislation. States like Utah would like to make social media 18 plus. Wonderful speakers like Brad Huddleston, the author of Digital Cocaine, he talks about smartphones and social media only being appropriate after age 25. Of course, why? Goes back to that beautiful developing prefrontal cortex. We are helped in this particular drive by the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He's also a dad himself, and he and his team for the last few years have been crunching data on what he calls this epidemic of teen mental health. And initially, about a year and a half, he started sending out messages saying 13 is too early for kids to be on social media. Then he said social media use presents a profound risk of harm. And in the last couple of months or so, he said social media platforms need tobacco-style warning labels. So he is slowly building this platform for what we're expecting is going to come from the US. At the same time, the CEOs of a lot of the platforms that are very popular, social media platforms, as well as gaming platforms like Discord, were called into a Senate hearing at the beginning of the year and were called to account for the mental harm that is being caused by their platforms and the lack of controls, because it is ironic that we have literally any product you can think of has that to which children can access has the most insane safety standards that you can think of, except for social media and gaming. And I think from this picture, you can also possibly pick up who was absent from this. It's a big gap. Currently, they're getting away under the radar while all of the rest of these guys take on the heat. And that is YouTube, owned by Google. So a big drive internationally with NGOs there to try and get Google and YouTube into this too, because that is one of the most addictive platforms. Our kids getting onto YouTube very young, and it becomes a very addictive space for them to be in. And of course, not all of that content is safe for them or age appropriate. And then the number one that he started with, the first norm that he wants parents to start thinking about, and that's very relevant to a community like yours, perhaps with younger kids that haven't you maybe not have made this decision yet, you haven't thought about it. Perhaps you're going to reflect on decisions that you have made after tonight, or you're reflecting on decisions to be made. But this is the big appeal, is to delay smartphones and iPads that would be for their sole entertainment use until high school. And just want to share with you something. So thrilled that just in the last 2 months, we have launched the South African chapter of the International Smartphone-Free Childhood Movement right here in South Africa. So this is a movement that was started by 2 mums in the UK, chit-chatting within their own local WhatsApp group about what they were seeing, having young kids and thinking about the specter of what's to come. And this has gone viral. So what is happening within this movement is it's a safe, non-judgmental space in which parents can come and learn and reflect and understand a little bit more about what all this research is saying. And it's a response to this idea that parents have been put in an impossible position. Either we give our children access to something that opens the door to porn and bullying and grooming and anxiety, or we risk alienating them from the peers. So the idea is that the way to solve this is with collective action, that if we all move towards a new norm, and it can be with school groups, WhatsApp groups, which are developing within the smartphone-free childhood environment, where people can share and learn. It can be parent pacts. A lot of school communities are looking at setting up parent pacts amongst those school communities. But it just takes the pressure off a parent, because your child is saying, but I'm the only one who doesn't have a smartphone, or I'm the only one who doesn't have social media. We can look to other parents, like-minded parents, and say, you're not. I know it's hard, and I know we've decided that we want to delay, and it's for very good reason that we want to do this. And it's not no forever, but we do have this building community that is also of the same mind as us, because we want to protect your childhood and your mental health. So the idea, guys, is that we are looking to get back to basics. We're looking to how we can support that mental health, how we can turn around this epidemic, and looking at those 3 golden cornerstones being exercise, nutrition, and sleep. And too much time on the screens is affecting each and every one of these. And looking at what are our own habits within our own families, what are we going to go forward into in a reflective mode in terms of golden habits that we're developing within our families and for these children who hopefully are going to set sail on much more golden journeys than perhaps the last generation has been able to do. So if, as I said, if there's only one thing you take out of tonight, it would be, please get those devices out of rooms at night. And obviously our role modeling as parents, so vital. So it's very healthy for us as well not to have our phones next to our beds at night. Put them in the bathroom, perhaps where you can hear them ringing, set up a charging station there. But that for me is the #1 golden rule out of any of them, if I can ask you to. I'm going to share one little thing that I'm sorry about going back and forth here, but we will get the sound going here. Such a powerful clip, that. Just love that. So I think, yeah, ending this message with this concept of being our children's best parents and not their best friend. Unfortunately, they don't always go together. I'm hopeful, particularly with mine now, 16-year-old, that having strived very hard to be his best parent from a tech and an online perspective, that I will eventually, it will dovetail into being his best friend, because it does provide incredibly rich opportunities to have discussions, to share opinions, and slowly for him to become more aware of why I'm trying to put the boundaries in and apply consequences to tech that I do. And I'm very hopeful that eventually, hopefully my house will be the one that my children will want to come home for Christmas, because we have had all of these fantastic opportunities. But in any event, I know that it's my job to be my child's best parent and not their best friend. So that is, in a nutshell, that is the message that we're bringing to everybody here. And I just would love to see how that resonated with you. Have a look in the chat group. I don't know, Shan, if you've been monitoring that, and you can give us a little bit of insight into any questions there. Please pop the questions. Let's have a chat. Tell me what has resonated with you as a community. Is this something that aligns with the Montessori values of what you're trying to do in your very innovative way of educating children and bringing them up in this modern world?
Kate, there haven't been any questions in the chat, but maybe people will raise their hand. I just want to say that last clip really resonated with me, because at school, we often see the disappointment that the children show when their parent arrives with their cell phone glued to their ear and comes to the gate, and we open the gate for the child to go out, and the parent is still talking on the phone, and the child sort of looking up at them as though they really would like just a little bit of a greeting. And it goes like that to the car, and the child gets into the car and the parent is still on the phone. And I think this is just such a missed opportunity for a parent to spend just a moment greeting their child instead of being on the phone. I see there is now one question. Lisa Glaister says, my husband wonders if the benefit of them having access to infinite information is worth losing out on. Could there be a balance with any positive sentiment?
And I don't think this movement, neither the smartphone-free childhood movement nor what Jonathan is saying is an anti-tech message. It is a slow tech message. It's a delay. It's a delay to allow that prefrontal cortex time to catch up a bit. And yes, a super amount of information that's available to them. And a lot of our primary schools do use iPads and technology as part of the educational process. It does create a problem, though, when parents are required to bring those devices, buy those devices, and then they come home. And it is now the parents' burden from grade 4 or 5 to have to try and manage what is effectively a decision that's being made by school. So I don't think there's shortage, and that's not what we're trying to stop. There's no shortage of opportunities for kids to use tech in a very positive way and an educational way. Our problem for the modern day busy parent is then how and to what extent does that then morph into endless entertaining screen time, which has a lot of dangers, particularly for younger children and even for teenagers, when it is unfiltered, unmanaged, and unsupervised. So I hope that answered the question for Lisa and her husband. Shan, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No,
Thank you,
okay.
Kate, for your time and expertise. The future with tech is quite intimidating with a 3- and 5-year-old.
Yes, but hopeful. So everybody with young kids, I've got a 16 and a 13-year-old. So I have been in the thick of this for the last few years. It's a very hopeful time to be a parent of younger kids, I do believe. And I think it's just also a matter of a pendulum that is swinging back. We've had that similar in parenting where, a lot of us might have grown up with very authoritarian type of parenting styles. There was a big swing in the last generation towards very permissive parenting. And that now is swinging back and settling towards something called authoritative, where you still have boundaries and you still have consequences, because that is the safety structure that our children need. But it's not a, this is what I say and that's what happens and we're not going to negotiate it. But it's also not a, my darling, whatever you want to do is fine. And I'm sure you'll figure it out. And that's very similar both in real life and in the tech space. This is where we are settling, is very much in the authoritative space, where we're applying our minds very consciously to the boundaries that need to be in place, to put the protections that are needed to protect these kids from a mental and a physical perspective. Any more questions? Post them.
More in the chat. Lisa says, thank you, though. You did cover.
Yes. Can I ask a question, Chad? What is the Montessori approach to using tech?
I think it varies from school to school. At our school, we basically don't use any tech. But I think you will find that varies with individual schools. And then there are a lot of other Montessori people here. Maybe some of them would like to comment. I see Cinya's got her hand up.
Hi, guys. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting, especially from a parent and a Montessori teacher. I just wanted to, there's a lot I wanted to say, but also just on that point that we have a computer in our school and a tablet and a laptop. And we also have encyclopedias and every other ways of researching as well. And what I found really interesting was a lot of the children, I work in a 6 to 12-year-old environment, and a lot of the children had no idea how to use a mouse on a computer because they're also used to scrolling on tablets or scrolling on their phones. So the principal and the school decided that they're no longer allowed to use their phones as devices, because we thought we'd be, they're allowed to use it at home. Let's be modern as well as, include it and monitor it. But there's absolutely no need for all of them to have their phones. So having a computer or some source of technology in the classroom is important because, like you say, technology is the future and they need to learn how to use it correctly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, getting into high school, the high schools require computers. They don't even require an iPad. So, and obviously in the workspace, that is a laptop is your go-to piece of tech. So you're absolutely correct. And there's many ways to use technology within the educational space. And our kids get a lot of screen time when it's used for an educational purpose. So this is really about reflecting all the missed opportunities that might be coming up in a childhood that is filled with too much time on screens, from an entertainment perspective, and the addictions that come with that, and the mental health impacts as well.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed in my 9 to 12 children the effect that some of the children are on TikTok and Instagram, and then some of the kids who are absolutely not allowed any devices, and how it's affecting both of them. So I've just really enjoyed hearing that conversation about everyone trying to go for a more community-based idea.
And Sinead, do you
no
see
devices.
a difference do you see a difference in children and in their maybe social skills or
Absolutely.
how they're presenting themselves between those that are having, would you like to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, quite recently, my colleague and I had an issue with one of our children wanting to get an Instagram account. She's 12, and her friend in our classroom, obviously we're in a Montessori environment, so all of our kids are mixed ages, and her friend, who is a year younger, 2 years younger than her, has an Instagram account. And, you know, she was telling us how this discussion came up with her mom, and her mom had a huge argument, and she just came into school really upset and completely shattered in her self-confidence, and also just understood the conversation that went down with mom. You know, mom is trying to protect her, but also doesn't know how to have that conversation with her young teenager, and may have used the wrong words instead of, you know, the right conversation tactics, which you can understand both sides.
Yes.
Because it's challenging for both of them. And then how do you speak to the child and the parent who do allow devices and do allow them to have accounts? And yeah, it's very tricky. It's very difficult.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we've got to be empathetic. This is not a judgmental. Every family has its own needs, and, you know, you've got split families. You've often got grandparents giving the children devices quite early, because, you know, what the algorithms serve up to granny is very different to what the algorithms serve up to our children. So a lot of our grandparents might, you know, just think this is something that children just have to have. This is part of life. So it's a hard space. And this is what, you know, the information that we're sharing tonight is just about. We're at a tipping point where we've been presented with information, and we can use that in any way we wish. But the information is definitely showing us that delaying the access of our kids to smart devices, and we're not talking about brick phones, feature phones, you know, a Nokia 3310, where the child needs to be in contact with the parent, or you know, somebody who's collected them from school, or whatever it might be. We're not talking about that tech. We're talking about smart tech, which gives them access online and gives them access to the apps and the games, which can only work on smartphones, which are not age appropriate for our children. That is what we're talking about here.
Thank you, Kate.
Kate, I see there's another question. Do you know if AI is developing anything in the space of detecting grooming?
Yes, there is. And part of the, you know, reasons that big tech, for example, is being summoned to a lot of these Senate hearings is because there is knowledge out there that they have access to, they have the ability to put in a lot more belts and braces, including AI, which would assist in picking up grooming on their own various social media platforms. So there is a lot of work being done in this space. And similarly, there's a lot of work being done. We assisted with a UK company 2 years ago, a philanthropic organization, which is looking at using AI to do a facial scan. So if a child wanted to go online and wanted to access a site or a app or a game which has an age restriction, that biometric scan of the face would instantly pick it up whether or not that person was old enough, as opposed to your common garden tick here to say that you're 18, which of course is easy enough for everyone to do. So yes, there's a lot of this technology is available, Shan, but it is a matter of big tech coming to the party, because the younger the user, the more the profit. So the earlier they can get a user onto a platform and get them sucked in with the persuasive technology, which is based on our gambling technology, they've got to go back. They've got to go back one more pull. That, you know, that dopamine hit is going to just needs a little bit more and a little bit more. So it's a very highly compulsive, addictive environment that they're setting up. The younger the user, the longer they're going to be on that app, and the more money they will generate from that user.
And then just a couple of comments from Melissa. Thank you. Some great insights that would be lovely to share with our parent community at our school. I can just say we are going to put this on the recording on YouTube. So if anybody wants that link, they're welcome to contact us in a few weeks' time or so.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to repeat this. For anybody else who would like to set it up for their own schools, we can do more of these. So and particularly I'm doing pre-primary schools and primary schools, a lot of schools at the moment, because I'm just wanting to get, you know, the parents as young as of the children as young as we can to understand this very hopeful message, and to be able to have this research to act upon, and to take highly conscious decisions as they go forward.
And then another comment from Liz Martins. As a teacher, it can be very evident if a parent has started limiting screen time for their child. They can become more attentive in class and less aggressive in social interactions. How do we encourage more parents to realize the importance of limiting screen time? And as you say, Kate, take the phone or tablet or pad away from the child at night time.
Yeah, how can we do this? Well, I think it's in conversations like this, we can have debates within our communities. We can recommend reading books like The Anxious Generation, perhaps in your own school newsletter, put snippets like that, drip feeding the information. And I think it's really about arming our parents, empowering our parents, upskilling our parents with the information they need to then go and make the decisions that they need to make for their own families and around their own children.
And then Fari says, how much screen time is acceptable in a day, educational and non-educational?
Yes, if you go onto our website, we do have a resource up there, which it summarizes the World Health Organizational guidelines. So go and have a look there. Depending on the age of the child, there is information there. And I just want to respond to Lisa saying that they've suggested to their parent community to agree to have no screens, and it was rather controversial. So I just wanted to respond that this is not a no screen ban. This is not no TV until you're 18 and, whatever it might be. I think it's just about a go slow, and it's an understanding that the type of tech that we are letting our children have access to, the when, the where, the with who, and the how, all of those are very important in terms of our decision making. And so, Lisa, I don't know if you were aware before you had this conversation of smartphone-free childhood. Go and have a look, check it out. If you go onto the website, there is a link to the Linktree communities, and there are regional groups, depending on which province you're in, that you can join and be a part of that discussion. Within those particular regions, there are schools that are being set up, schools, communities, and perhaps that's something that you want to look at setting up for your own school community to start getting like-minded parents having this discussion together.
And then Sally has got her hand up.
Thanks, Joan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I had two things. The one was just a question. You've mentioned about the regulation or the efforts to try and regulate in the US. And I mean, I certainly followed when they brought, it was a bit of a different circumstance, but when they brought the guy that does TikTok in front of Congress. But as much as, regulating it in the US might lead the way, what is happening in South Africa from a political and policy level? So that's just my question. And then just a comment as well. I hate being that person that says I have a comment, but
no, please do. We like comments.
I went to school. I'm an 80s baby. I went to school in the late 80s and the 90s. I still think of school in terms of standards, not grades. And I still remember in junior school there was, I remember when we didn't have a TV. And then when we did have a TV, I remember when we didn't have access to certain programs like Mnet, for example, and other kids did. But I also remember that when we had a TV, there was another girl in my friend group and they didn't have a TV at home and she always came top of class. I'm not going to say whether there's a correlation or not, but she was super brilliant. That's TV. It's different. The TV's in the living room. It's something that, it was family access only, but it's something that stuck with me all these years. And I still remember that friend. Yeah. And just what hasn't stuck with me is, when other people had Mnet and we didn't, it didn't stick with me that I was missing out, although it might have then, but hopefully I can just use that to kind of empathize with my kid.
Yeah, well, I think when we look back as well, our childhood memories are not built on the most amazing movie we ever saw. And they're not going to, our kids' memories are not going to be built on that most fantastic TikTok that they experienced. It's going to be about the real connection, the family time, the friend time. Those are what the memories are that's going to keep them, support them through the years. So I think what you're reflecting on is just, I think that friend of yours was probably quite lonely, not being the only one who didn't have a TV, but it was that, she had so much time to take all of those other opportunities that would otherwise have been missed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, we all read books and everything. It wasn't, our lives didn't revolve around TV in the way that certainly our lives tend to revolve around our smartphones. And I'm not saying that for kids only. It's adults, it's parents, it's me. I'm watching this on my smartphone right now.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yep.
But back to
it's all of us, and the role modeling is so important in terms of what we do, because it's whether it's our device next to our bed at night, it's how much time we're spending on it, it's zoning out from family conversation, it's the family dinners, so all of that is completely role modeling. So just as healthy for us to be more conscious about that as well, whilst we are trying to be conscious for our children.
Absolutely.
May I also make a comment? I just don't know how to put my hand up. But anyway.
I think that's Tracy. Can I just refer back just to my question about South Africa, but it doesn't need to be answered now. Go ahead, Tracy.
No, Sally, let me answer your question.
I just don't know how to put my hand up here.
Okay, Tracy, you're next.
Thank you.
Shall I answer Sally's question quickly?
Yes, of course.
So Sally, very little, unsurprising. And we've also got issues between where all this responsibility sits. So we have a film and publication board, which is still very archaic and very much from the days of,
they're useless.
Rating all of our movies and film and deciding what back in the day we were actually allowed as South Africans to watch.
They're also politically captured, if I might add. I hope there's no one here that's got connections to them, but
yeah. So there is a lot of there's a lot falling through the cracks. We've had draft legislation for a number of years, which is stalled, and that is looking at a whole revision of the legislation, and particularly around exposure of children to online pornography. All of this has just been, I could carry on all night because I work with lots of NGOs around this. So we have very little action happening. And that is why we are trying to just put a petition through straight to the new Minister of Basic Education, that we really want them to look at a national policy level. So it would cover private schools, public schools, that we would have legislation similar to countries like France and the Netherlands. There's a whole host of them that have actually legislated at a country level, that at least smartphones are not welcome during academic days at schools. And that is at least a big chunk of time that we can give our children off screens, off devices, and be a big investment in the education for our country. So I hope that helps. And Tracy, you wanted to ask something.
Yes. As a teacher in my class, we're busy with concert practice. So I'm new to Spotify and then linking it to Bluetooth. That's how old school I am. And our children are sitting beautifully on the circle line. As soon as I pick up that phone and I go and look for our songs, I look up and all these little faces are around my knees. They're like completely drawn to the phone. Then I've got to say, please sit down. I'm just looking for, it's amazing how as soon as they see a phone, they're there. It's just, they're absolutely drawn to it. And then I've got
we.
Yeah, true, yes. But it's just like I just
they're built like that, Tracy. They've got billions of dollars put into them to build them like that. Yeah.
No, I just it boggles my mind. I'm like, I'm just looking for our songs, children. Like, we'll tell you when to start. And I've got a neighbor who's homeschooling her 3 children, and it just amazes me. Our complex has a lot of young families. She has no TV, anything like that. She's very, very homeschool type person. Her eldest daughter's 14 that still wears her hair up in a pony, no makeup, t-shirts and jeans, rollerblading. You see her children outside all day. And it's just that I said in one of our teacher meetings that I encourage my 6-year-old now to go rollerblading, and we'll get messages from the complex. The children are here, the children are there. Is anybody supervising? I get asked all the time. I said, I do go every 15, 20 minutes. I go and I have a look at the courtyard. They get moaned at because they were around trees. I got a message to say my daughter's up in a tree. Am I aware of it? I'm like, yes, I am. Thank you very much. But just, I wish more parents were more like this neighbor who has this homeschooling, no TV, no devices policy. It just shows, because I have kids that we know have been living for years. You don't see them outside. And next minute you see they've grown and you're like, oh, but her children are always outside. So it's a good example, so to say. So yeah, very interesting how this phone works.
Yeah, to keep an eye on those kids as they get into teens, just see if those are, if they are, managing, if they are, they can look you in the eye and they can have a conversation.
Polite,
These are the children that can actually pick up the phone and phone somebody. They'll be able to go to the local coffee shop with their CV and ask for a job. These are not skills that kids that have grown up with too much screen time can do, because they just haven't taken all those micro risks along the way and develop those social, emotional, interpersonal skills, because unfortunately connectivity in terms of screens doesn't translate into connection. And so although we might be talking to people on the phones or on via games, we're not learning that very important body language. We're not learning to understand how our message has been delivered, understanding how messages are being sent back. So all of those are very much an interpersonal kind of experience.
I've also been saying to my partner at night not to let our daughter to watch kiddie games or whatever before bed. And what we've been saying to parents as well, read books before bedtime instead of taking that phone.
Wind the brain down. Wind that brain down. Absolutely.
That's an option we can give our parents is please read instead of giving them the iPad or the tablet to watch a few things before they go to bed. Just read with them. That's my suggestion. But thank you. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
Joanne's
got a
hand up, Joanne?
There we go. Sorry, so to unmute myself. What's quite interesting, my daughter's in a private school here in Pretoria, and they've recently banned phones from during school hours. Where so like during break, all kids used to bring out their cell phones. Now they're not allowed to do that. So that's quite nice for me as a parent. But what I
Which
think
school is that, Jan? Can I ask?
Eduplex.
Okay. Yes, my son is at St. Albans in Pretoria. So, and a little while ago, his headmaster has decided that no smartphones for teachers and learners during the academic day.
Oh, I like that one.
That's been an interesting experience for them all. But he says he's just not having that phone in his pocket as he walks around, and allows him to really engage with the boys and properly check in and really understand where each of them are at.
Yeah. What I also like now, you just mentioned now, and keeping an eye on those children. I don't know if many teachers ever experienced this, that how the young children in preschool battle to make eye contact. They're so used to looking all around them. There's this sort of constant buzz around them. And when you speak to them and say, look at me, they look everywhere but at you. So
well, it's hard. It's a skill. It's hard. It's it's intimidating. It's difficult. So kids that are not growing up with learning that skill are finding it very hard. And it's something you can't do without in your adult life. So
and keeping it real. I think that's the one thing that we keep on saying to our parents at our school is let them experience these things. Let them take real risks and not risks on the phone where do I jump this way or do I jump that way? Which risk, where am I going to fall down?
Go build that ramp and learn how to, get your mountain bike to sail over it. And if you have a few scratched knees or whatever, that's fine. But go and do those physical risks or those interpersonal risks. Go and learn, go and talk to that boy or that girl that you kind of go fancy and try out your new joke. Go out and do all of those things. You want to go out for pizzas, kids. Okay, whose turn is it to phone and get a booking? You've got a phone. You've got to learn how to phone and say, hello, how are you? We'd like a table for 4. Those are very small ideas around which to build to help your kids learn that independence, because for them it's a very risky thing to do. But once they've done it 3 or 4 times, it's easy.
Yeah. It's also in our classroom, we did a whole thing about then and now. And we had an old telephone, the old one, we had to wind it up and everything. And we had these 4-year-olds to push in a number, they knew the number, and they ordered pizza. I'm thinking, I don't know how to order a pizza when I was 4 years old. So, that's where using technology could be in there an advantage. But it's all about balance, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sally, you've got another comment or question?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to take my hand up, but I see that Noel has a hand up. I'll take mine down.
Okay.
Where is Noel?
I think it may have gone down now.
Yeah, I think
maybe
it's
it was.
gone down. Yeah.
So lots of questions about the recording, and I think, Sean, you said you were going to be sharing the recording, so people who joined.
It will be on YouTube, so if anybody wants the direct link for that, they can just send me an email and I'll give them that once I've loaded it up.
And I will just pop my email in here if anybody's got questions or need to chat about something afterwards. It's there. And of course, if you want to have any discussions about this for your own schools or other schools, I'm very happy to talk as much as we can into this topic and bring this message of hope and reflection to as many of our parents as we can. So if there are any more questions, shall we, is that it, Sean? You want to
Thank you
wrap up with any more of your own reflections? Yes?
I think that we've really had a good evening, and thank you very much, Kate, for your time. And thank you all for coming. I think it's been really worthwhile. I've just been listening and thinking back to some students we had come to the school recently who came in to ask if they could ask us some questions for a survey. Did we use tech in the school? So I said, no, we don't, because we don't use TV or computers with the children. We do in the office, obviously have a computer. And then they said, yes, but anything is tech. A knife is tech as well. So I thought, I don't know. Then I think we're pushing it a bit far. So any tool can be classified as tech. I don't know. I cannot believe that is what their research was supposed to be on. So yes, we do use tech in our school, if I'm going by their classification, but not by mine. Anyway, thank you all very much. Have a good night further, and I hope you'll be back for our next Thursday talk. Thank you, Kate. It's been really worthwhile.
Thanks, a pleasure. Lovely to be with you all tonight.
Everybody must now buy the book because it really is good reading. We're thoroughly enjoying using it as a staff study book at the moment. So
glad. Anyway, good.
Good night, everybody. I'm going to close.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you, Kate. Thanks, Sean. Good night, everyone.